Hello and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Today I'm joined by Ivica Pavlinic. Hello Ivica, how are you doing?
Hey Dave, I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, good. I'd like to start the podcast with talking about how you got started in judo, where your journey began.
Yeah, I started judo because my big brother did judo. I think you've met my brother before, but my Eastern European parents, they thought he was too soft. So they pushed him into judo, and naturally younger brother wanted to do what big brother wanted to do. So yeah, that was in New Zealand, and grew up in New Zealand, and then ended up judo started as a childhood hobby for me, and it quickly, got out of control, and I was a national team member in my teens and into my 20s, and now I'm a full-time judo coach. So yeah.
So how old were you when you started?
I was 7. Started 7.
Whereabouts in New Zealand were you living?
So I started judo in Palmerston North. It's a small place, like 80,000 people or something. And then when I was about 12, my family moved to Hamilton, and I did most of my, when I was training in New Zealand, predominantly I trained in Hamilton and a little bit in Auckland. I'd go once or twice a week. We'd drive to Auckland for training. Yeah.
What was the judo like there?
It was a little bit tough because once again, Hamilton's a small place, but we were kind of fortunate. We had a few athletes in the town who were national team, and we all trained together. So there was Sean Choi, who was 3-time Oceania champion at 73s. He was there. Then we had Lee Bronkhorst, who was under 60 Oceania champion. And we had Kurt Kirby, who was 66, and I believe he was Oceania's silver or bronze medalist. So we essentially had a 60, a 66, a 73, and an 81, and we'd train quite regularly together. But aside from them, if Sean, those two were too small for me, and if Sean was out of the country at a competition or something, I had no one to train with, essentially. Yeah, so it was a little bit like that.
So when you say the training was tough, you don't mean the actual training was tough?
No, the training wasn't tough.
Partners was tough.
Finding partners was tough, and it was. I'm sure we'll talk about coaching later, but you learn, looking back on it, we didn't train as efficiently as possible with limited partners. I think there's a way you can train effectively with limited partners, and doing randori for half an hour with the same person isn't the most effective way of doing that. So yeah, it was a struggle finding partners. Look, we were motivated, so we all trained hard. We trained together every day, generally did a morning session, a gym session, and a judo session. So, a morning fitness session followed by gym and then judo in the evening. So, the motivation was there, and the no thrills intensity was there, but with very limited training partners.
You said you were on the national team as a teenager. What was that like, being sort of in New Zealand, obviously tucked away at the furthest reaches of the world?
It's a little bit the first time when you go overseas is a little bit confronting. Having only ventured off to Australia occasionally for a few competitions and maybe done Oceania Championships. I remember when I was about 17, I went to Korea for a competition and a little bit of training, and that was an eye-opening experience for me.
In what way?
The level was eye-opening. It was like, okay, well, I need it's very confronting as a young man, thinking you're good at something, and then you quickly find out I'm not as good as I think I am. Yeah,
I feel as though that emphasises the point.
I'm nowhere near as good as I think I am. Let's say it like that without any swearing. But at the same time, like that first competition in Korea, everyone around you who's gone overseas is, there was a motivating factor, because everyone around you who's gone overseas at your age within New Zealand, loses first round. I ended up going and fighting, I think my first round was against a Korean junior number 1. And I got a Yuko on him, so it was a little bit of motivation. But then the next fight, I had a rapid charge fight because he pulled me through. And then the next fight, I got my ass handed to me. And I was like, okay, it's still hard. I have got a lot of work to do. So that's that quick realization of the level of international judo, and that's even at a junior level.
See, I had that experience when I was 12.
It's because you were in Europe.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's...
And do you think that's a big factor? Because we've had this conversation before into, like, what do you think would be the ideal age to begin? Do you think sort of 12 maybe too young, or like, is that a good age, or 17 probably too late to have your first experience?
So I think the longer you wait, the worse of a reality check it is. I think for an athlete, for purely time wasting purposes, the sooner they have that reality check, and the sooner they find out, like, oh no, this isn't too hard basket, or okay, this is what I want to do. So for an athlete, I think I don't particularly see a harm in doing it at a cadet age, 16, 15, sending them overseas, so they do get that reality check and they go, okay, this is what the level is, this is what I have to do. Whereas a lot of people, they get amped up and they think they're better than they are, and then, they're 20 years old or 19 or 18, and then they go overseas, they go to Europe or South America or Asia and go, okay, this is very confronting. I'm nowhere near as good as I thought I was. So I think the younger you do that, the better. Because I don't know if 12 is a good age, but I think kind of 14, 15.
I don't think I was the youngest as well. I think Nathan Burns.
Yeah.
I think
I know Nathan.
I'm pretty sure he's a year younger than me. So I think he was 11 at the time when we went, and it was organised through the Northwest area. Went as a squad, and I think it was about like 20 or 30 of us, all sort of ranged through maybe like 11, 12, all the way through to 17, 18. I remember we slept in the sports hall. It was in Sweden, and we slept in sleeping bags on the floor, on the mats, and there was like, I don't know, maybe 600 other kids there.
Yeah, wow.
At the competition, a couple of hundred stayed for the camp. It was an eye-opening experience. And I got the shit beaten out of me, right?
Yeah, it's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And I think
after I went back and got a bronze medal, right? It's that levelling up, and I can tell you the next camp and competition where I got the shit kicked out of me, and it was just always that levelling up, right?
That's the thing about judo. The better you get, the harder it gets.
With anything, right?
Yeah, with anything, really. Yeah, like the better you get, the harder it gets. But you are getting better. That's the point. It's like a gym as well. Like the stronger you get, you don't keep lifting the same weights. Yeah.
So I was fortunate that the area I went to was quite forward thinking in terms of like taking these trips and going overseas, and that was like the first one, and then from there onwards, I was all over Europe with the area, and then later on with the national team. And regardless of that, like the clubs that I went to also was taking players overseas, and again we're in Europe, so it's maybe a little bit easier to get because it's a shorter distance. But whose responsibility do you reckon it would be? Do you think it should be like we're talking, say, about Australia, New Zealand now, right? Do you think it's the state level or the club level, or do you think the national level should be pushing these trips at a younger age? Well,
I think Judo Australia does it quite well. We're planning to send a few. We're planning to send a few cadet teams away this year.
I suppose the past 2 years have been a bit of a write-off.
Yeah, 2 years. The last 2 years haven't been great. Thanks a lot, COVID. But I think Judo Australia does it at a national level quite well, where we are going to send athletes away.
Which athletes are going to be selected for that? Will it be like the sort of top? I mean, obviously without naming names. Do they go for like the top 2, top 3? What's the sort
it depends on the competition, because some competitions that they are going to have a restriction in terms of amount of entries per country, but then there's other competitions where we're allowed to take up to 4 per category. But once again, it's up to the selection committee and stuff to kind of say, is this athlete ready? Because, once again, as we've already mentioned, with young athletes, it's not just, they're going to get that eye-opening experience with the level of judo, but also are they capable of going 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or it's probably 3 weeks only, but going away from home for that long, are they going to be... So it's all those kind of factors that we have to take into account.
How do you figure that out for someone who's going to be on their first trip?
Well...
Is it just a sort of let's see and hope?
Well, the ones, we've had a training camp already this year for cadet and up national teams or national development squads. So some of the athletes, we've already seen how responsible they are or how they cope being away from home, being without parents, being without that support. And then a whole bunch of them got COVID, so they had to stay extra. So, we kind of and they had to isolate without adults. So once again, we kind of have had a few athletes we've been able to look at in that situation. But yeah, obviously without naming names. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think state level, I think we in the future should do kind of incentives kind of for people who have performed well to kind of give them a trip away. Club level, I know the club that I work at the moment, UNSW Judo, they did it a few years ago with a trip to Japan. But once again, it's hard at a club level because when you kind of announce a trip to Japan, you'll get a whole variety of people who want to go. There'll be some people in their 30s who go, oh yeah, I want to go to Japan, and come along. But then when you get to the location, you have to cater the training to everyone. So it's tough at a club level, especially coming from a small club like I did in New Zealand from Metro in Hamilton. Often, we went away, but it was just two of us from the club. It was just Sean and me, or Lee and Kurt, or something like that. Yeah. So it's not really a club trip. It's just two guys going away together. So it depends on the club, I guess, is what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way.
Yeah, I suppose there's not many clubs that would be in a position maybe to organise a trip solely for the players in terms of like the numbers, like you say. It's more of a solo mission, or
exactly.
one or two people.
Yeah.
And in terms of where to go, because the closest place is probably in terms of value for money, like a target-rich environment where you're going to get good judo would be Korea, which I've never trained at myself, unfortunately. It was one place actually I regret not trying to go to. I went to Japan 3 times. Probably should have mixed in somewhere else in there to spice things up a bit. But so in terms of Korea's probably and Japan are probably the two closest countries where you're going to get a good practice, right? Are you trained in both?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where would you think, from your experience, where would you say would be the best place to take like a younger team?
So the kind of problem with Japan is when you take a younger team to Japan, all the athletes, all the people they come up against are more seasoned, are more kind of, they've been doing judo for 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day since they were, 9 or whatever. So the problem with sending a young team to Japan is they won't actually get any technical input because the Japanese kids have already, Japanese judo, they know Seoinage, they know Uchimata, they know Ouchigari, Kochigari, and they're drilling that every day. So I think taking young kids to Japan or taking young adults to Japan, you miss out on that technical side of things. I don't know if there's as much technical development in the Japanese kind of high school or university as you would in the European dojo, for example. I think Korea would be a little bit. I wouldn't recommend sending kind of high school kids to Korea because Korea is like Japan but 20 years ago with sticks and stuff. It's a bit kind of more hardcore, for lack of a better term.
Maybe what they need.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I should get a stick at training tonight. I think Europe is, when they go to Europe and stay in Europe for an extended period of time, not just the training camp, but if they stay longer and train at a club, they will get technical development too and technical input from the coaches there. So I think that's the kind of big benefit of Europe. In my experience, having seen it happen before with Kiwis, if someone goes to Japan and they're not at a level where they can, there's two things actually. One is finding the right level for that person. And two is kind of, if they're not at a level where they can actually throw people in Japan, they just become too defensive. Their mentality in the randori is to survive the randori, not actually throw the person. So I've had experience with a lot of people who have gone to Japan and come back, and their attacking judo, their defensive judo has got a lot better, but their offensive judo hasn't actually improved that much. They're still like they're fitter and they can defend better. Well, they can defend Japanese judo better. They can't necessarily defend a back grip or whatever. But yeah, so I think that can be kind of a fallback, a kind of a pitfall of going to Japan too early, especially for an extended period of time. Whereas if you have young athletes, you send them to Europe and then they get technical exposure and stuff like that, and then you send them to Japan afterwards when they've already got a decent level of judo and they can kind of compete. I think that's kind of a more, let's say, I call it a smarter strategy. You've been to Japan, you just do a bucket load of randori. So wouldn't you rather go to Japan when you actually throw people in randori rather than when you can't?
I thought I could throw people in randori when I went to Japan. And again, got a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
On all 3 occasions. I assumed it was going to get not easier, but I think the first time I went as part of a team, so we went as between Baker and Kendall Judo Club, there's a few players and we all went. Yeah. I think it was four of us went, and the coach. And then the 2 times after that I went on my own. And
that's tough on your own.
Yeah, I mean, at least when you got friends there, you can laugh about the fact that you're getting beaten up. When you it's a bit more tragic when you're on your own.
You can laugh at them. You can laugh at the mirror.
Trying to laugh through the pain. But yeah, I think, as I say, because of those trips in Europe that I've done leading into it, you do have, there's already that resiliency there, physically and mental resilience in terms of in terms of the training. But it's quite different in terms of length of sessions and the intensity of the sessions as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So where in Europe would you did we meet in Europe? When you were on the sort of circuit leading into like 2012, isn't that where we?
2016.
Sure. 2016 was a bit later on.
I don't know. I thought we met. I think we met before we kind of re-met here.
Yeah,
because you looked really familiar.
I think I might have spoke to you at the Com Games in 2014 because I knew Mark Brewer.
Yeah,
so I knew him from
maybe
2010.
The year
so
before.
Maybe it was,
did you fight at Glasgow the year before, 2013?
Yeah, I was around. Yeah, I was around.
Yeah, maybe we met then.
Yeah,
because I was definitely there for that trip. Came 5th, I think. So
where in Europe when you travel would you say you're going to get best sorts of value for money and kind of a rich environment?
Well, I kind of one thing. There wasn't many things I did right in my judo career, but one thing that I did do right was living in a whole bunch of different places. So I spent an extended amount of time in Japan. I spent an extended amount of time in Uzbekistan, Slovenia, Serbia, Croatia, France, Holland. So
was that something, before you go on, was that organised by yourself or was that something organised by the New Zealand team?
Occasionally, a bit of both. I'm not going to go into every specific one because it'll take too long. But for me, one thing we struggle with is exposure to different styles of judo. Everyone kind of in Australia, like we get exposure to Japanese style judo because everyone here wants to do Japanese style judo. And even kind of Western European judo, we get that kind of exposure because there's a whole bunch of expats like yourself there's a whole bunch of French guys in Sydney and Brazilians, so that kind of judo we do get exposed to within New Zealand and Australia. What we don't get exposed to is the around the back, the kind of like bear hug stuff, like Georgian judo, Russian judo, that's what we don't get exposed to. So for me, a big place that did a lot for me personally was Slovenia, and it's kind of right. It borders Italy, so it's not too scary in terms of getting to, and it's not too. Everyone there speaks English as well, so it's not that difficult of a place, I guess. But the judo is very good, and it's kind of that kind of combination of both. So, but once again, you don't want to, depending on the age of the athlete, you don't want to, if you've got an experienced athlete, sure, send them to Georgia. But, you don't want to send a 15-year-old, 16-year-old to Georgia, of course, because, it's too much of a culture shock as well. So, I would say it depends on the athlete, but I would lean towards kind of central Europe, so you get a little bit of exposure to that kind of there's bear huggy judo. So, I'm sure Germany, Poland, things like that, where it's not a complete culture shock for an athlete. It's very manageable. It's still Western culture, but they will experience kind of different fighting style that they don't get to experience at home. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think even all the European countries, I would say, have their own style to a certain degree.
Yeah, they do.
So each country is known to
do
have
something
a slight bias towards different. But
you go to Holland, it's top grip because they're all bloody tall. Slovenia, they're all shaking you, and it's every country's a little bit different, as you say. Yeah.
And so let me rephrase the question I just asked you. So not who organised it, but who was driving that? Was there something that you drove, saying, I want to go to these places, I want to do this, and then you guys, or was it Judo New Zealand said to you, listen, you need to go to do this?
It was a little bit of makeshift, because you kind of look at, okay, like you had a limited amount of money, so you had to go overseas with minimum amount of flights. So okay, I fly to France, I fight Paris, then I can train in France, then I fly to this competition. So the way it kind of worked was, obviously I've got a Croatian background, so I could fly into Croatia and have free accommodation, so that saved me a whole bunch of money with free accommodation with family and relatives and stuff. So it was always a little bit like that kind of, how can I get the most bang for my buck? So I'll do these competitions and in the meantime train in this country. It's in the middle of all those competitions. So that was the kind of mentality for me at that time. It was, as I was struggling as a in a sport that didn't get good funding in New Zealand, that was the kind of strategy. Make the most of my opportunity while I'm there. So it was mostly me. So looking at the competitions, yeah.
Okay, so question to bring that back around then. So you were driving that on, right? And then, say from my point of view, even though I was close to Europe, still it was something, I was exposed to, but then I was like, right, I want to go on these trips. It was something I was driving personally, and those trips were going to happen anyway. From my experience, I know there's one or two boys, but Josh and Nathan Katz, they're probably one of the few exceptions to this in terms, I met those boys in the UK at Camberley Judo Club. They were training out there. Yeah. Whilst they were at high school, they were travelling over to there with a summer holiday, training in Camberley. Yeah. Spending the Christmas in a tin shed.
It's paid off.
Much, and that's right. Okay, so those two boys obviously come from a judo family with the parents as well, right? But they will be two exceptions where of the same mind frame, right? Let's go to an area where we can get a lot of training, right? Yeah. There doesn't seem to be that many other people that seem to be going, listen, this is what I want to do. Well, no, actually, that's true. There's a lot of people that seem to be saying, this is what I want to do, but then their behaviour doesn't seem to align with that, as in they're not like, right, I'm going overseas, I'm going to go and do this in Europe for a while, basically what you've described. There doesn't seem to be that much of that going on. Why do you think that is?
To be honest, that's human nature. Everyone says, I want to do this, and they don't do it, right? It's not just judoka, it's just people. It's I think...
But you didn't do that, though, right? There's some human natures, there's another side to it as well, because then there's the human nature of some people going, that's what I want to do, so I'm going to go and do it.
Okay, so I think there's... I'm not a psychologist, but there's people who are comfortable being uncomfortable, and there's people who don't want to go out of their comfort zone. So, there's a whole bunch of people, judoka who are training. There's a whole bunch. We've got a training session tonight. We've got a hub session tonight, right? We're going there after this. There's a whole bunch of athletes who want to get better at judo from potentially not strong clubs who are not going to be there tonight. Right? Because they want to get better at judo, but they don't want to get out of their comfort zone. Right? Then there's people who are essentially comfortable being uncomfortable. And I've seen you train, I've seen you fight. You don't mind a fight. You don't mind being in an uncomfortable position. You actually thrive in that environment. And that's the kind of people like Josh and Nathan, who you mentioned, who are willing, that that kind of drive and the kind of, okay, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it, you know, because it makes me better. That's the kind of people that do that, do go overseas and just kind of throw caution to the wind and go. So I think, yeah.
But that was something for me that was, I don't know the right way to describe this. So this is a conversation I had with my judo coach Brian Moore. So we sort of discussed this, and he went through it as my coach. He recognised that ability in me, even though I didn't know I had it at the time.
Yeah.
And when I first started out, I remember going to because they would have the British Cadet Squad in my hometown of Bakerloo, which is just the arsehole of nowhere. Yeah. But because Brian was the coach, so I ended up getting invited along at a young age, and again I just got the shit beat down. It was very overwhelming, and there's times where I was like, I got at a young age, like 11, 12, so around there, I was like a bit overwhelmed by it, and I didn't want to go to the training sessions, but like thankfully my parents and my coach held me through it, right? So they recognised that, and then it was something that a skill that I had but worked on, right? And was able to go through, right? So how many of these kids, say, have that within them that maybe don't necessarily know it yet? And then how would you identify that and then you coax it out of them? Would that be the right way to say it?
I think resilience is something you can also teach, or you can...
Yeah, it's a skill, right? So
it's a skill, yeah. The more kind of hard things you deal with, the more resilient you are to other hard things in the future. So even the ones that aren't necessarily resilient, I think you can surprise them by pushing them a little bit further, and you're pushing them to, like we had at UNSW Judo, I saw something that the competition the weekend showed me, like as a coach, like, okay, well, this is obviously a problem, and the way we dealt with it was in a kind of an extreme way, but they all survived and they all kind of went, okay, wow, I need to fight like that all the time. And it was like they're all exhausted and falling over after the session, but they saw the value in it afterwards. They hated it at the time, but they saw the value afterwards. So I think that you can kind of push people, and they kind of have that kind of switch in their head. Some people don't. Some people never get that switch and go, why am I doing this? Other people go, why am I doing this? Because I want to achieve that. So I think, but yeah, once again, I think you can make people mentally more tough by giving them challenges and progressively making the challenges harder.
And when do you think they should start? Do you reckon? I think obviously you spoke about in terms of sending a kid that's overseas and the right age for that. And where do you reckon it should start in terms of exposing someone to those challenges of training?
Well,
and obviously it'll be a measured challenge. You're not going to get but where would you still provide enough of a stimulus to challenge someone?
You can kind of, I think when they're kids, they still don't know what they want. When they're senior boys and girls, which is under 14s here in Australia, under 15s, they still don't know whether they really want this or not. But then kind of...
No, but is that because, again, so when I was 15, I fought in the Cadet European Championships. Yeah. I'd done maybe 20 overseas competitions by that point. Maybe 15, we'll go 15, between I'm 20, right? And camps, and I'd been exposed to that from the age of 12 to 15, right? And I sort of knew that I wanted to give this a go.
All right, well...
Now, is that because, would you say maybe the athlete's age...
I kind of knew later. I knew about age 12.
Yeah, okay, exactly.
But the point is, where I was going with that is more you talk to a child, you know the difference when you talk to a teenager and you talk to a child, and even if they're in that kind of maturity, can be anywhere in that kind of frame, right? Where they, you talk to some 12-year-olds and they talk like teenagers. You talk to some 16-year-olds and they talk like children. So I think that cognitive and mental kind of age is what we're talking about here, rather than a physical age. So that kind of ability to kind of say, okay, this is something I want in my life, or not just like, oh, this is somewhere I'm going because my friends are going, like, why when I'm running a kids session in judo, you probably do so, you play more games than you do with adults, because you don't, but that's because you're a tough bastard.
My tiny tots doing randori,
but yeah,
5-year-olds.
We live in different areas.
We're a very tough bunch of kids.
Yeah, we're living in different areas. But yeah, so for example, the example being though, like, it's that point where they want to be at judo and they're not getting brought to judo by their parents. It's their choice to be there. I think when you have that, I think that's when the cognitive age is where you can start pushing them more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. When they've kind of made the decision to be there on their own, then you can test them. Pull-ups. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier when I was at the gym. We were talking about how the way we used to treat like different sports, and she was, I think it was soccer or rugby. She said footy. Who knows? I get confused that with the original pitch. And we were talking about how, like, I was talking about my experiences on the trips, and we'd have the training camps, and then during the rest period we'd be fighting. Yeah. Right, so we put the boxing helmets on, boxing gloves, and we do a thing called milling, where you'd put your head together, and you'd basically be punching each other, and the first one to step backwards would lose. Yeah. And that's how we enjoyed ourselves during our rest time. Yeah, right? Like, I think back, like, the time just seemed perfectly normal. And,
yeah, but you're looking back at it,
and you think, it was no wonder I've got a bad memory now. Like, knocks to the head, and I've got a lisp. But she sort of said the same thing, not to that degree, but like the older players would be giving the younger players, like, challenging them as went along, and do you think? And obviously there's the team camaraderie, and it's like, this was a team. We were like the Northwest team, and they were, I don't know what team she played for, but there was this sort of like group. Even though judo is obviously an individual sport, right? We were still part of this Northwest area team. Yeah. And then we were challenged by the coaches. Yeah. As a team, we would help each other out, push each other on, and then challenge each other within the team as well, right? And you sort of work out the pecking order. And I came into that with that already well established, and so I you just sort of fell into the line, right? Yeah. And that would be seen during the training sessions. You'd have someone out in the middle, and you'd be doing randori, and then there'd be people fighting to be able to be the one to go out next, right? Yeah. And I have no idea where that started. Yeah. Okay, so I just came into the system, and I was like, right, well, this is it, right?
This is my spot. And
then like, at first it was like, what the hell is going on? And then it's like, all of a sudden it's just like, I'm the one, and there's other new people being like, what the hell's going on, right? And then you just, and then I push that as a coach now. That's something I to a certain degree, I'm trying to build as how do you think, because obviously you were saying about testing the athlete, but how do you build that kind of culture if that maybe doesn't necessarily exist?
Yeah, there's something I'm looking to kind of work on. So there's a few things that we've talked about before, is just like having a van and going to competitions together and building up that team atmosphere. So it's funny. This is a funny story. One of my junior men, he gave a lift to a couple of cadets from the same club a few weeks ago to Hub, and he picked them up and they both sat in the back. So he's like a chauffeur for them to training. So it's like, it's the most
Uber driver.
Yeah, it's the most like.
Did at least charge him? I'd have charged him if he did that.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just the most kind of like. It's not like 3 teammates going to a training session, that's 3 individuals.
Guarantee they're all sat on the phone. Well, obviously not the driver.
Yeah,
the 2 boys at the back were just sat on the phones as well,
in silence. Yeah, and it's kind of like, this is something that I was actually really annoyed about it, because it's just like, guys, you're a team. You kind of like, and they all see each other every day. I make them train every day, and some mornings they're training together, and like, so
they might just be sick of each other.
Maybe it was that. But yeah, it was a disappointing thing, because one thing I am trying to do is kind of build up team camaraderie and kind of that kind of social group. Because you have a core social group, then, especially with teenagers, then people want to stay around. Yeah, they like, so the core, like if you have a core group of athletes, people want to be in that core group of athletes, as you were just talking about. So, but yeah, I'm at a club level, I'm struggling to establish it. There's more of it at a state and national level. Like when you walk into kind of a hub session that we're about to go walk into, you'll see athletes from different clubs mingling. So it's starting to develop there. And then you push them at the end of a session and make them do something terrible. And then you can
all unite and hate me together.
And then but yeah, you see them encouraging each other, and that's kind of how you have to build it, I suppose. Like, yeah. Yeah,
because that's something that's not surprised me, but was different to me when I came out here, and being part of the state, was how it was a group of individuals coming together, being individual, and then going, like, everyone was going off to, say, the national championships, and everyone's turning up on the, by themselves, or, maybe 1 or 2 club mates, but it wasn't like, this is the state team, and, something we had. It's
a cultural thing, because I remember when I was their age, when I was a teenager, and I was at school, I had other judo blokes, the training partners at the school, but I wouldn't hang out with them at school time. I'd have my other friends at school time, and I know like 2 of my boys that are coached, they go to the same school. They're at a different age, but they don't really chat to each other at school. But then when they're training, they train with each other. But then I got to university, and then all of a sudden, for some reason at university, all my judo mates were my best mates at uni. I don't really know what the difference was, but there it is. It's a cultural thing. Yeah, it seems. I think people separate different things. So they separate school, judo, ballet, whatever else they're doing.
Yeah. In terms of from like the coaching, say maybe in the management point of view, do you reckon that there could be a way then of like bridging that cultural difference and bringing the people together? Do you reckon there's stuff that can be done?
I'm sure there is.
But do you think it's worthwhile doing?
I think it is worthwhile doing.
So I was making that assumption there.
Yeah, it is worthwhile doing for sure. So, for example, you found some logs recently, and I'm trying to kind of think about.
They're just lying there in Olympic Park, looking like they wanted a good home.
Yeah,
they looked like they wanted to be carried.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I'm trying to think like, Saturday morning of our state training camp that's coming up. Should we get? It doesn't need to be the veterans athletes, but get them to come in the morning before the first kids session and just do some log carries. I did that in Holland. We had to carry some logs through the forest. I hated it at the time, but looking back, it's a fond memory, and you go.
Yeah, I think this is the misconception sometimes, right? There was a lot of the time that I hated training.
Yeah.
And that's it's not a bad thing. Like, how many people sit there and hate their jobs yet they still go to work for 5 days a week, 9 to 5, right?
Yeah.
There's some, and that's why you're not going to love training all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I hated it, there was still the appreciation that it was doing me good. So even when I was carrying those logs and it was cold, and I was like, oh, this is just shit. And I know my coach will be very upset to hear that I didn't love every single second of it. But I still knew that, and that was the thing that I needed to do if I was going to improve, right? And that's not even necessarily improve as in terms of win more medals or anything like that. It was just in terms of improving as a human being, right?
Yeah.
And I know like when Brian would turn around and say, right, well, who's going to go for another run? And I didn't want to go, but I was still at the front with the other guys, putting my hand up, being like, I want to go for another run, and I'd still go and do it, right? Because I knew in the long run, making that decision rather than standing at the back was going to benefit me. Yeah. Even though I hated it, right?
Yeah, I'm much the same. I can remember a training session where, we were doing pressure randori, 5 times 1 minute. And it was like, this was in Auckland, and like, I remember being absolutely exhausted, and the coach, Rob Levy, kind of said, oh yeah, okay, we're going to do one more. You guys haven't been up, we need one more person up. And I just did it again, because it's just like, I don't want to do pressure randori. No one likes pressure randori. You're not meant to like pressure randori. And I walked out and did it just because I was like, okay, it needs to be done. It's you just kind of get on with it. You don't enjoy it, but you get on with it because it's just what you have to do.
Yeah,
and that's probably what we were talking about earlier in terms of that kind of mindset. Just do what you have to do to achieve what you want to achieve. Like, obviously, this is at a much more smaller level. Like at a training session, you do what you need to do to achieve what you need to achieve. Whereas earlier we were talking about going overseas, and we were talking about it at a bigger level. But it's the same kind of.
That's where it starts, right? I think sometimes people think that it's all of a sudden just gonna come together, as if the little things, like you say, being pushed, not standing at the back, pushing on and being like, I want to go out even though you don't want to, right? At a club session, when the coach goes change, and you change, you don't, and get somebody else, you don't just walk to the side of the mat, right?
Yeah.
And it baffles me. I look at a training session sometimes, I see people at the side of the mat, and these are people who are like allegedly wanting to push on for state selection, national selection, and it's only like an hour and a half session. And I think, well, there's 22 and a half hours in the day where you could stand around doing absolutely sod all, but you're at judo, why wouldn't you practice?
Yeah.
And it kills me softly to see sometimes, right?
Yeah. I said it like what you just said, literally just said it to an athlete yesterday and on Monday. Just, look, you're a trainee now. You don't have training until tomorrow night. Just leave it all out there. Like, be exhausted. Train yourself till exhaustion. You've got 24 hours recovery after this, or 22 hours recovery. So it's like, kind of, are you using this moment that's been given to you right now? Are you using it to the fullest? But I think that's, once again, it's not just judoka, it's just people in general. People say, oh, I want this, but they don't do it. But yeah.
So the point, I realised where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Rambling on, I got lost in the... I suppose, so is that starting implementing those little changes and those little things at a club level?
Yeah.
So when they come to you as a state coach, your job should be easier because those players should already have that ingrained, right?
Yeah.
And I think it seems maybe going back to the culture, and it seems that the easier options picked, like you say, instead of picking, okay, there's going to be people that are going to want to push themselves, right?
Yeah.
But it does seem that a lot of people are more comfortable being comfortable instead of being comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just maybe something like that is part of the culture out here, or is it something else?
Well, part of it is lifestyle. Lifestyle in Sydney is easy. It's a comfortable life if you're living here. It's not that hard to live comfortably in Sydney. So comfort zone thing is a thing here in particular. But then it's kind of having a working mindset, a hard working mindset, but you also need a positive mindset. Like, you kind of, when you have, okay, I want to achieve this goal, this was good, this is a good thing to be doing because I'm achieving a goal. That's a positive relationship with something difficult. So I think a kind of positive mindset, even in kind of times of adversity, goes a long way in training. So you kind of like, I don't know, I think you know where I'm trying to go, but I'm trying to find the words. Like sometimes, as we've already said in this conversation, training sucks. Training can be terrible. But if you know why you're doing it, it's a positive thing. The difficulty is a positive thing because it's making you better. And if you have that, I think kind of installing that into athletes is part of the step as well. It's part of the process. So rather than them saying, why the fuck am I doing this? Them saying, sorry, I swore again. Why am I doing this? Instead of that, them saying, okay, I'm doing this because it's making me better. This is a positive. This pain I'm experiencing, this discomfort I'm experiencing is a positive thing. So I think that goes a long way, and kind of shift the frame of reference for the difficult thing you're dealing with to it. Because, whenever you're dealing with something difficult, ultimately it makes you better.
Have you ever explained that or had that conversation with any of your athletes?
The positive psychology with my athletes, I do it a lot. Like,
is that formal or is that something you sort of like drip feed them during a session?
Like, for example, at the end of every session, all my athletes have to write down 3 positives from the sessions and 2 things they want to work on next session. They don't need to show me, they just got to write it down for themselves. If I've seen an athlete have a bad randori and get frustrated, I said, it's gone now. Why are you frustrated over something that is gone? Be in the moment, be present, be right now, go do better right now. You've got an opportunity. You've had a bad randori, you've got an opportunity to have a good randori right now. It's like, kind of, don't get frustrated over something that's gone. Does that make sense?
Something will definitely happen again in the future.
Yeah. If you get frustrated every time you do a bad randori, it's got to be a tough gig, this judo stuff. Like,
especially if you go to Japan.
Yeah. Like, I didn't throw anyone. I didn't get thrown that randori. All right, well, you got that big Georgian next randori. So that's, I think that positive, that kind of mindset thing is something. I think athletes should have a growth mindset, not just being better athletes, being better people, and they should also kind of strive to, like, we're about to go to Hub very soon. We're about to go train at Hub. Like, athletes there's a few of them who are fighting for spots in like the Australian team, but they're not actually. If they're looking at each other as rivals, that's very short-sighted. We want them competing internationally. Their rivals are over in Europe and Japan. Right now, they're resources for each other. So when I hear athletes say, thankfully our ones don't, but I've had it in the past when an athlete says, I don't want to go train with that person because I fight them. That's kind of like very short-sighted. Like, yeah, this person is your best training partner you have here right now because they're your biggest rival. They're your biggest resource right now. You two are pushing, you had Mark Brewer on recently and we were like constantly in competition with each other. So we made each other better. So, it's like he wasn't a rival, he was a resource because he pushed me to make myself better. So that comes back to growth mindset in athletes. So you shouldn't view people around you as rivals. You should view them as resources because they help you grow. And I think kind of having that growth mindset as an athlete goes a long way. And you kind of, if you do have a bad session, you're like, okay, well, what good came from it? Well, I trained my ass off. That's a good thing. Even if I got fitter, that's a good thing. I learned something new. I'm rambling now, but I want a situation. I don't want kind of a situation where I want athletes, once again, growth mindset, I want athletes to be learning all the time and adapting all the time. So I want to put them in difficult situations where they learn. You know what it's like at the end of the day and you go and do randori and you're just going through emotions in randori and you're not actually learning anything. I want situations where...
I'll never do that. Or it's 100% focused.
100% focus, yeah, always. Sure. Or 100% focus 100% of the time. That's a challenge and a half. But yeah, I want athletes when they're in that kind of. I play a few little mind games with them. So when they're tired, I give them mini goals. So this is your little goal that you have to achieve in this randori. It's an achievable goal. And once again, because it's achievable, it's positive. Okay, yeah, I got my ass handed to me in that randori, but I did pin the sleeve for the whole time, you know, something like that.
Yeah, there's always some lesson to learn, somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to dig deep to find it, but there's always. Yeah. I had this conversation with one of the lower grades at the club, and he got beaten up basically during the randori. He got flogged. I could see like he got a bit upset about it, right? You know, it got to him, and like, you know, I'd recognise he was a bit of a younger lad as well. He's in his teens, and you know, I recognise that. And I was like, well, I've been there. I know exactly what's going on. Like, when I explained to him, I said, listen, like, sometimes it's just about standing up
and going again
and taking hold, knowing full well that you're probably going to get thrown because that person's better than you.
Yeah,
and you know, it's the lesson to learn there is just about standing up.
Yeah. And judo is a great metaphor for life. No matter what happens, get a grip and do your best.
Yeah.
Stand up, get a grip, do your best. It's like life, right? Yeah.
I think we should wrap it up there. That was very profound. I think we should.
I stole that off.
Overhead.
I stole that off Mr. Broadhead, Ben Broadhead. So I can't claim it. He said that to me when I was dealing with something difficult. He said that to me. There you go. Yeah. No, judo is life.
It's Judo Way of Life.
Judo Way of Life. Judo is life. Judo Way of Life. Yeah.
Mate, it's been awesome. We didn't really have a plan for this conversation. To be honest with you, I was going to go more towards technical judo coaching points. And we went way up from there. But
the holistic route. It
was good. I mean, it's nice to leave things sort of open and organic, and you know, see where they go. We'll have to do this again sometime. We'll go down maybe a bit more sort of technical judo and that side of things.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd really like to hear your opinions and your thoughts on that side as well. But I mean, I enjoyed that, and you know, thank you very much for taking the time to come and join me before we run off to judo training. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I was looking forward to it, and it lived up to expectations. Yeah, good. That's good. Cheers. Underwhelmed. Awesome.